Rucker, welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And you want to go ahead and tell us where you currently work?
Yeah, so I'm currently at Davidson College, which is in Davidson, North Carolina, about 30 minutes north of Charlotte. This is my, I think, 6 years as the head coach, was associate head coach for a few years before that.
So, your leadership story, really what you told me before, was you started noticing yourself getting a little frustrated. So, why don't you
Mhm.
take us there?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, came in as an assistant associate head coach, and I think part of coming in new, you set a lot of expectations. Hey, we're going to do this way, this way, and then took over as the head coach 6-ish years ago, and very similar. Hey, this is this is that, and I think as each year kind of passed, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, we've got a great group of people. The returners are going to remember. They're going to teach the new players, and it's just going to be systematic. And they get tired of hearing my voice, and I don't want to hear my voice anymore. They certainly don't want to hear it. And the less I can speak, the better. And there's been a couple of years when we had like incredible leadership that was a pretty seamless transition. And then what I started realizing is that at 18, 19, 20, 21, they've got a lot of other things going on. There's a lot of other distractions. And at some point, if the consistent was me getting frustrated with different people, with different teams over different years, then I'm probably not doing something right. And I think what finally came to the decision this year after talking to some coaches a lot smarter than I am was that a lot of really successful programs, a lot of really successful coaches are having fairly lengthy standard setting type meetings, expectation meetings. This is how we do this is how we do that. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 hours, and sometimes it's beginning of the year, sometimes it's beginning and middle, and there's certainly checkpoints throughout the season. So for me, a little bit against what I want to is where I don't want to just talk for 2, 3 hours towards a group of people. We decided this year we're gonna have a sit down formal meeting. This is the expectations for, simple stuff. If you get an email from a professor, you need to answer within 24 hours. If you get a text from a coach, everybody's got their phone on them. Nobody doesn't have their phone for 10 hours unless they're sleeping. Even as, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I've got it. I'll get back to you. And that was a little uncomfortable making that decision to do it, but have done it, and very, very glad we have emphasized that, put that in place. I think what it's kind of, stupidly on my part, just thinking, hey, they're going to remember it, they're going to know it. But if it hasn't been conveyed, especially if there's 10 new people in a team of 35, that's almost a third of the team. There needs to be some level of expectation of this is how it's done, coming from theoretically the head coach or somebody in a quote leadership position, as opposed just to maybe a junior or senior returner player. So it was, I'm not that smart, but I'm smart enough to realize I was tired of getting frustrated, and it's like, all right, like let's do something different. If it works, great. If not, we'll figure out what the next step's going to be.
So, let's unpack that frustration a little bit. You said you've been doing this as head coach for 6 years. When did you start noticing the frustration? Was it like, by year 3, you're like, I'm kind of annoyed, but I'm
Yeah,
going on,
right. So I think it was even going back all the way to as an assistant, in that we'd set very specific instructions at the beginning of the year, and you maybe get halfway through it and things are, lax a little bit. And sometimes you just need to be some reminders. Hey guys, we talked about this. This is what we established. And then generally from that point forward, things would be very good. And kind of what I realized is if it took a checkpoint halfway through the year, sometimes kind of silly for me to think with no checkpoint at any point, much less the expectation being set at the beginning of the year, that it's going to be retained and going to be used. So I think it even started prior to that as being an assistant. I think you see it a little bit more in bigger picture stuff. And just some of that too is guys understand we have a very open door policy. When is the right time to ask something? And I joke about, now we had a guy that texted me at like 10:30 at night. Hey coach, I've got an issue with my socks. We had a game the next day. And we had, this was like one of the early games in the fall, and we had like 3 different periods during practice during that week of, hey, if you need anything, let me know. In an email, if you need anything, let this person know. That day, that then in practice, hey, does anybody need anything? Let's go grab stuff now. And then you get a 10:30 text at night. So be like, what are we doing? So I think it's just clarified, hey, that 10:30, and that was kind of the joke in our the big meeting this fall was, hey, this, and it's the players said, hey, we don't need the 10:33 p.m. text. Hey, I need stirrups for the game tomorrow. Especially when it's been 3 chances to get those. So I think just making light of that, but using that as an example of let's think sometimes, and then conversely on my side, is that we've got to set the understanding of how do we communicate, not necessarily how do we think, but what is our process for thinking maybe, and how do we go about that collectively. And I think it's been the right decisions. It's been good.
So, how did that frustration show up in your life? Like, were you going home to your family complaining? Were you kind of did you notice yourself getting short with players? Like, because frustration's building, right? You said over a couple years, 3 years, maybe more. And that comes out, right? Before you decide
It does.
to change. How did that show up?
Probably being short. And sometimes if it's the fourth question the day of, hey, what are we doing in this context? Rather than it's like a practice, or hey, what do we have here? And when the practice plan's emailed out, it's posted. Hey, like we've talked about, we've discussed it. So I think when you get that fourth question of the day, yet in my mind, they're explicitly said, hey, when you get to the field, check the practice plan. Or when it's emailed to you, check it so you know what's going on. If you have a question, go look on one of the, depending on the day, 3 or 4 different spots it's posted. My term common sense would tell you to do those things. That my definition of common sense might be different than somebody else's. So I think just, hey, this is, if you're not sure, check here. This isn't sure, ask a teammate. And I think that's been helpful when, maybe it's the same person consistently asking a teammate, hey, dummy, go do what you're supposed to and figure out I'm tired of answering. And it was funny when somebody asks a question like that's maybe already been addressed. And I can just kind of look at maybe a guy's teammate beside me, and they're like, yeah, we've already talked about that. This is what it is. And I kind of laugh and go, hey, that's why I get frustrated when I get 5 of those a day every day. And they're like, nope, got it. So I think just bring a little bit of awareness to it. I think, indirectly, you're hoping as a coach, it brings some accountability to the players and certainly to them as teammates too. I think that's been something the guys have done a very good job of. Big picture, and certainly in this case, there's an awareness of, hey, if we're told what to do, if we don't understand it, again, it's very, very open door at our place. Hey, what does this mean? Certainly try not to belittle or sarcastic in any kind of question like that. You want those questions. If it's the other side of, hey, I've been told this 6 times, it's posted here, it's posted here, it's posted here. Hey, can you tell me what I'm supposed to do? That's the one where you kind of, all right, man, like really, like where's the disconnect here? So, but the team's done, I think, a really good job of that, and especially some of the older guys and really the younger guys too. They've been very process oriented, which has been wonderful.
Well, I love what you said about common sense, because what's common sense to a leader, or anyone really, we're just not always speaking the same language. We're not coming from the same headspace, same background. So yeah, what's common sense to you is not common sense to some of the people that you're leading. So what led to the turn to say, okay, these guys, this team's frustrating me. What about me? Like, what can I do about it? Did you start seeking advice and then they led you to, hey coach, it's you? Or kind of, when did you start exploring solutions and start, looking other kind of to yourself and your leadership?
Yeah. So I think, after every season, the summer becomes a very busy recruiting time. So there's a lot of travel during the summer. So it's really the very end of summer, August, there's typically a week or so stretch there where there's not a ton going on based on the recruiting calendar, based on when the kids are coming back to campus. So you try to think, what can we do different? What can we do better? Certainly have conversations with former players. Hey, could team-wise, anything we need to be aware of? What's better? What could be done different? We don't have grad school at Davidson, so a lot of our guys do graduate school elsewhere, and some weirdness in the NCAA around COVID. We've been able to have a lot of guys that have had a 5th year of eligibility. And hey, what'd you do at your new school that you liked? Is there anything you didn't like? What can we do better here at Davidson? And that's been really helpful. And a couple of guys said, hey, it was borderline militant where this. There's some places where there's like no structure to it. So I think getting the different feedback of what people liked and what people didn't like, talking with our other coaches here, A couple of guys have been at places where it's very, hey, this is day one. Here's a packet. This is where we're at every second of the day. Some are getting thoughts from just other coaches that you have no association with, but you respect how they do things, or at least what you've heard about them. And really just kind of came to the conclusion that there's some coaches I respect that tend to do that thicker, hey, this sit-down meeting, and we're going to walk through it page by page. And if it seems redundant, if it seems boring to the older guys, well, that's fine. Life's going to be a little bit redundant and boring sometimes. Right? The game of baseball certainly can be redundant, repetitive, and some would call it boring occasionally, and that it's part of it. So for us, it was, hey, we're going to let's try this course of action. Talked with a lot of the returning guys about it. Talked with some of the former players about, hey, we think that's a good idea, and we probably had so planned it to be about an hour and a half, hour 45, and we ended up going 2.5 hours. Because I think some of the current players had some things to talk about. Some of our coaches certainly talked, and really at that point we gave all of our current staff, coaches, they had the opportunity. The floor is open for them. A little bit of a formal, hey, this is slight change of the union address right here. Nothing drastically different. Not changing our school colors, or we're not going to start playing lacrosse instead of baseball. But just, hey, this is how we'd like to kind of go about things, and think this will make everybody's life a little bit easier. And really, I guess last year we also added in a kind of a community sheets, Google Sheets, whatever the proper term is, and a lot of the information day to day is put on there. We do give the current team feedback. Hey, would you guys want to get information through group text? Do you want it through team email? We have some software called ARMS that we can send messages through there as well. And traditionally, if it's a non-urgent message, it goes through email. If it's something a little bit more time sensitive, I'll send either a text or a ARMS message, and that's giving the guys some flexibility of how they want to get that information. So it's certainly taking in their input, coaches as well, what we kind of can relate to as far as messaging and giving that message and hoping it's received as we intended it, and then just taking their feedback from there.
I love that you have continuous feedback and improvement. I think that's a sign of great leadership. But I want to go back to something you said earlier in the conversation. You said that you had to get around some discomfort with maybe this new, more structured approach. Did I get that right? Okay, talk through that a little bit. What felt uncomfortable to you about that?
Yeah, so I think it's probably I don't know if personal bias is the right term, but so growing up for me playing baseball, my high school coach was also like the infield coach and the kind of the defensive coach and the offensive coach, and you did a lot of stuff. So I was an infielder and a pitcher, and so I heard his voice a lot, and we have a great relationship. My college coach was also the infield coach, also ran our offense, ran our team defense. So as an infielder, I heard his voice a lot, and I just remember thinking, especially when I became the head coach, because I think whether even if the players stay the same, going from that assistant, that associate head coach, whatever, at the end of the day, when you are the head coach, there's a little bit different interaction with the players. You try still to have that personal relationship, but it does at the end of the day differentiate things a little bit, I think, maybe from the players' view. So I think for me, it's okay. Well, if I've got 8 or 10 infielders this year, those 8 or 10 guys are hearing my voice a lot because I'm doing infield, I'm doing team defense, a lot of the individual and team offense, and certainly team practice. I mean, those guys are hearing my voice a lot. So how do I maybe not have to be heard as much? And you hope it's through, peer-to-peer, captain, group leadership. But I wasn't doing a good enough job of, I think, instructing those captains, that leadership group of, hey, this is what we want. Or as a reminder, this is what we want, right? And I think in some cases, some years we just, because they're great kids, they had been good leaders in the past, they've been great teammates in the past, they're just naturally going to evolve into that. And it doesn't always work that way. There's some years that we were very worried about our older leadership, leaving one season, going into the next season. There's some years we're very comfortable with it. But what I failed to do is I don't think I nurtured, developed, coached up, helped those leaders nearly enough, early enough. And I think that's, certainly something I regret. I think each team has a little bit different characteristics, each leadership group does. But I think that's a commonality that I didn't do a good enough job of getting those guys prepared for the next year.
So one thing I'm thinking about is everyone has, I think, this authentic leadership style, the ways we naturally tend to go, right? So,
Mhm.
and then things get in the way, like the voices of your old baseball coach in your head, what you should or shouldn't do. Like there's a lot of factors that influence it. Would you
Mhm.
say naturally you're more of a, hey, let's sit down for 2.5 hours to give you the expectations, or you're more, hey guys, we're just going to figure this out, or somewhere in between? Like, 'cause it seems like you're kind of trying to figure out, you know, what I'm pondering is like we all have this authentic leadership style, but there's
Mhm.
also things that are just better for a
Mhm.
team, right? So
Mhm.
if someone's natural tendency is to be like, we'll just loosey goosey, we'll just figure it out,
Mhm.
but it's not working, at what point do you
Mhm.
need to come into a different leadership style, even if it doesn't feel comfortable? So
Yeah.
does that question make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. I think I've probably morphed a little bit. I think 10, 15 years ago, I told you I was, let's just sit down for 2.5, 3 hours. And I think I'm probably instinctively, naturally more inclined to that. I think as, I don't have my cell phone. Everybody's got the cell phone, right? It's everything's instantaneous. The attention spans maybe a touch less than what maybe we were expected to do 20 years ago as a college player. So I think for me, I don't like when people waste my time. So I don't want to waste their time. So we're going to have a set meeting, and if even if a couple of guys are, you can see they're starting to disengage, like that bothers me because I'm thinking, wow, like I mean, they're not delivering this effectively. They don't want to hear it for whatever reason, which is probably a whole bigger issue. But in the day, we're not getting the message across, whether they don't think it's important enough to hear it, or it actually isn't important enough to hear it. So I think that's one where I have changed as I was getting deeper into being the head coach here. And I think that's where I kind of went, okay, well, end of the day, I'm probably am that. Let's lay everything out there. Let's have those expectations. And if a team of 35, if two or three aren't making that connection, that's my guess is that's probably still a pretty good reception rate, but we'll connect with those guys differently. Or if they're truly not that engaged, maybe Division One athletics isn't the right thing for them, and that does happen. We don't have especially compared to a lot of other Division One athletics, we don't have a lot of guys that leave or don't play. I think a lot of guys that come here, they feel comfortable. It's a good fit. So I think I've probably gone from let's do a 5 hour meeting to somewhere, okay, do we really need to meet as much? They'll figure it out. And I think when that started occurring, I was putting so much faith in them, and I probably wasn't setting the environment right for them to get that information. I had to backtrack a little bit. Okay, we're going to set the expectations. So we're going to try to have the right environment, but we've got to at least try to explain the goals, what the environment should look like, how we want to set it up. And then from there, if there's still issues, we've got to troubleshoot. So I think that's given me some peace of mind. I think the frustration, this fall specifically, and we had, I think 13 or, I guess technically 14 new guys this year, which is a huge number for us. And three were older guys. There were 11 freshmen, I think three older guys. And it was a year that our older leadership was smaller and maybe a little bit of a concern just based on some guys that got drafted last year that probably would have been our leaders as seniors. They drafted as juniors, which is wonderful for them. So the group's done a really good job with it. They really have. And we have several new assistant coaches this year. So there has been a lot of transition. I think without setting that first meeting, I think the possibility of frustration would have been really high this year, just the reality.
Right.
So I think that was probably part of the decision too was, hey, this is a year that's probably going to need a touch more direction than maybe some others. So let's go ahead and do that. I've been very pleased with how the teams responded. And I think the coaches collectively too have done a good job of kind of building around that initial concept.
So I think go back to something you said. I think everyone can relate to having like you're doing a training or a meeting and you see a few people start disengaging and it can get in your head, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We never know what they've got going on, but yeah, it is very distracting. So you had the first meeting recently? Is that what you said? The first sit down
So the
or is
first
this
true
the fall?
one, yeah, the first true one was, I guess, roughly September 1st. So we typically give the guys a couple of days to, hey, where's the dorm? Where's the cafeteria? Where are my classes? So I think it's maybe the second night just to give them a little bit of breath. And the reality is I've told a lot of our coaches this, if the first week, if they're not coming to the field and doing stuff on their own, that's a bad sign, because if they don't want to be at the baseball field hitting and throwing, you've probably got the wrong group of not self-motivated individuals. So it's gonna be a long season. So yeah, this was roughly September 1st.
Gotcha. And the results have already been like something that you're excited about. You've already seen some different results from past years. Is that correct?
I think so. And it was, again, going into it, we had probably 5 or 6 different individual players that I talked with about it, some concepts, talked with all of our coaches, talked with a couple of other college coaches I have a lot of respect for. One even sent me their top 15, 10 type, national program. He sent me, their outline, what he ran through. I kind of went back to my days as in college at Vanderbilt, and I think they do very similar type structure. I think they have a lot of classroom time, is what they call it, with the baseball program. And if I think that led to that 2.5-ish hour meeting, and I'm not a even good technology person, but I had a PowerPoint, was able to do some. It's amazing how easy PowerPoint makes it compared to 20 years ago, and had some graphics and videos. It wasn't just like the standard, like red background, blue font. It was good. It was good. So it was good for what I thought I could do, at least. And I think a little bit of engagement through that. And I think the guys, especially the older guys, know that, hey, this is different. I explain why we're doing it. And I think that gave them some level of understanding, hopefully a little bit of a buy-in. But I did think that was a very productive. And in my mind, if it was 2.5 hours as opposed to maybe 15, 20 minutes, probably save that much time on the back end just with questions or text or emails or, hey, is this going on? And it's been good. It's been good. We start team practice again Friday for the spring season. So I might retouch on a few things this week, but they've done a very good job to date. And I do think having the Google Sheets, so there can be, hey, here's the calendar, here's the outline, here's this, here's that. I think that as a resource has really helped, because they can pull up the phone, click, there's my answer right there. I think that has been helpful.
Yeah, and you talked about a midpoint check-in, so it's a potential for it to be like a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a midpoint. Hey, if you see
Exactly.
some things going awry.
Exactly.
Okay. So a few things I want to dial in on. One of them is your support system as a
Mm-hmm.
leader. So being a head coach, obviously you have your coaching team around you,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm imagining it can be a kind of lonely job. And you mentioned getting, talking to your coaching team as well as maybe some other coaches out there. So who do you typically look to for support when you're facing leadership issues?
Yeah, that's a good question. So probably answer a couple different ways. So, foundationally Christian. So I think when in doubt, whether it's prayer, whether it's a little bit of quiet time, I think those things are, end of the day, I think that's the ultimate person I'm answering to. So I think that does guide a lot of things. And, if there's unsure about this decision, I'm still going to talk to a lot of people, but I think end of the day, whether it's prayer, quiet time, thought, or however you want to phrase it, it's, trying to hear that voice, and using that probably as the ultimate guide. Family wise, my wife's from Scotland, and she knows not a lot of baseball in Scotland. So I've got some
There's not.
buddies. Nope, no, no, no. So I've
Okay.
got some buddies in the coaching world whose wives are like, why did you play so and so versus so and so? Why did you sacrifice bunt versus hit and run there? And if I'll come home, say, hey, babe, congrats on winning, or sorry y'all lost, and there's a really cute dog at the game today. There's and she's a teacher, so there's plenty of Tuesday night games or Friday night games that we play that she's zapped, and she might not make it to the game. That's perfectly fine. So hey, saw y'all won, congrats, or hey, y'all were winning till the end, and sorry you lost. So I think that gives me a little bit of separation, church and state, which is nice. I think that's part of the frustration. This conversation kind of sit around is, you get home at, a normal night, we're probably getting home 7:30 from practice, maybe 8 if it's later practice. And then you get, 2 or 3 texts from maybe a player or a recruit or a travel coach. And the way my mind works, I want to answer it. I want to answer. I want to answer. I want to get it done. And what I'm trying to do a better job of is, that phone, it's not surgically attached to me, right? So I can put that phone somewhere and not look at it till, my wife goes to bed, or I've got time to decompress whatever's needed. And I love reading fiction books like murder mystery, that kind of things. And if I can do that 20, 30 minutes before bed, lowers the old heart rate and gives me a little bit of clarity, I think. So I think I'm trying to do a better job of not being on 24/7. And, I think that's a lot of coaches will tell you their mind truly never separates. I think there's a lot of really good coaches I respect a lot that is 24/7 with them. And it's amazing to watch. And I think that's a lot of the reason they have their success. I think from talking with some of those guys, you do see that they are able to separate at the right times and give themselves a little bit of balance. But, I guess circling back to that question, our former head coach is our sport oversight. So it's good to get his opinion on things as a, now administrator, but also a former, 25 plus year head coach at the same place we're at, which is very helpful. And, some of my best friends, in general are, in the coaching world. So there's some guys that I feel are stronger in some areas than others that I can bounce things off of. And ultimately, the other coaches on our staff, we have a lot of conversation about, hey, what do y'all think is, whether it's, hey, who should be in the lineup, or, hey, here's a discipline thing, what do you guys think? And ultimately, as the head coach, you're going to probably make that final decision, but you do want to give those other guys voices. I think it helps the, staff morale to some level, but I think it also creates some buy-in. And ultimately too, if it's a discipline issue, sometimes it's a travel issue, we ask our captains, and we have a captain's council, which is basically one representative from each class. So each class has a, theoretical voice for their opinion. And I think ultimately, especially if it's a, tougher decision about something, hey, well, this group of 6 people, captain's council, coaches, we all came to this conclusion. We decided how this is going to move forward. So if something, goes sideways, ultimately it's still, my responsibility, probably 99.9 times out of 100. But there's at least a buy-in. Hey, we agree to this together. We're moving forward together. How are we going to make it work together, as opposed to, man, Rucker's an idiot. Why are we doing this? We should handle this differently. So I think that's been good. And I think it also gives the team, the other coaches, some insights into some of the things we deal with day to day. We had a former coach that came in from professional baseball coaching there, and we had an issue with a couple different departments on campus trying to get some stuff installed. And he's like, "Holy cow, is this what, like, is this the amount of red tape? Is this normal?" I was like, "Yeah, this is red tape, brother. This is, it's not pro ball. It's a little bit different." So, moments like that, I think, are good for everybody. I really do.
Yeah. It's just how universities work, right? That's just how
Yeah,
it
yeah,
goes. Yeah,
yeah.
and I really like that you have different sources of strength and support. So from your faith to your family, and to other coaches, I think it's important for leaders to have that set of support. So, Rucker, what have you learned about your leadership yourself over the past 6 years? I know you've been leading before that,
Mm-hmm.
but you've definitely, leadership's a journey. So as you look
Mm-hmm.
back, like what have you learned about yourself?
Whew, that's a good question. So I think it's an awareness of, there's a lot of things going on. I think at times I've struggled with, it's, do you take the game too seriously, or do you take yourself too seriously? Because, at the end of the day, it is college athletics. Ultimately, I think for me, it comes down to, are we so focused on just the wins and losses, or is there an environment where, these 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds are getting better as people? And that's certainly not a linear process. I think sometimes teams that aren't winning, they talk about, well, we're just going to have a good experience and we're going to develop our student athletes. I think you can win and develop human beings as people also. And I don't think that excuse of, well, we're just going to try to have a good time and give the old college try. I don't believe in that. But for me, ultimately, is when a person leaves our program, are they a better person because of it? And, generally they get better at baseball. But I do kind of think that's a byproduct of the tough nature of the sport, its consistency, its mental and physical toughness. It's showing up every day, which I think ties into that consistency component. And ultimately, it's competing. I think that's something, especially coming out of the COVID year, athletes that want to compete, that want that scoreboard on, it's tougher to find that. And I think sometimes, hey, you fail, that's okay. Well, yeah, you're going to fail, but what do we learn from it? How do we learn from it? And how do we develop, them from that? And that's certainly myself included. I don't like losing. It's tough giving everything you've got and failing. And that's, I think people often talk about, well, maybe if you don't give everything, there's a psychological component that if you don't give everything you've got, well, internally, if you fail, it's because you didn't give everything you got. And, that's something that, well, no, let's see what we are or what we aren't. And if we're not good enough, we'll circle back and figure it out. So I think for me, in a really long answer to your question, it's taught me a lot. And I'm 39. I'm still learning. I mean, it's every day. I mean, it's, who am I today? What is this program today? And how do we get better? And that's certainly, I think, an ongoing process. At least for me, it is.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're a continuous learner. I think that's really important because there's actually been, a research study recently that said that after 2 years, first 2 years of leadership, they train, they get their skills up, and then it kind of plateaus. And so I love that you're a continuous learner. And one thing I just want to point out for a lot of people who coach collegiate athletes, so they have a work team, same thing. Can you make the people better after they leave your leadership? So I really love that you think about that. So Rucker, thank you for taking us through this leadership journey of yours and kind of really being honest about your frustration. And I think a lot of leaders get frustrated, but the fact that you're willing to talk about it and take us through what you did to pinpoint and course correct, I think shows a lot about you as a leader. But before we close out, do you have any last words, anything that if you want space to say before we close?
I think it's I think the best advice I got in the coaching world was, and I heard it from a couple different people that are incredibly successful coaches by pretty much any metric, and it's just be yourself and whatever that is. And I think you can you break that down into just coaching? No, because I think that's life, right? Because I think what you are in life is probably impacts what you are professionally, and I don't have it figured out, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. But I think it is, it's part of this fun thing that is life and frustrating thing that is life too. And, I think that while your principles and your values may or may not, change a ton, I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle here and there, depending on what stage of life you're in or what you've learned. But I think for me, I think that's, being yourself ultimately is a pretty cool thing, and figure out what that is and what you're most happy with and proud of. And that's probably not an easy search, right? So I think that, if you said there's one piece of advice, it would be yourself. And that's probably all walks of life. And I'm not a huge fan of the cliche be your best version of yourself. But I think ultimately there's probably some truth of, try to be that best version, whatever that is. And, Monday might look a bit different than Tuesday, but, nothing's linear, or very few things are linear, right? So, yeah, that's the best advice I've probably gotten is be yourself. And it was applied to the coaching context, but for me, that's probably all aspects of life.
I love it. Well, thank you, Rucker. I appreciate your time.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.